been a very unique moment. I mean, the Obama era, in a lot of ways. So my final slap, like I've had a few experiences throughout my life. There was a famous police gun violence case, Philip Pennell, 1989. He got shot up my block in Teaneck, and it was a very polarizing event. I was 9, and then it was, throughout those years, there was a few things. There was like a police shooting in Cincinnati while I was in college, and the campus was on lockdown for like a week. The city was on curfew. But then the final thing for me was Katrina. And it kind of like just...
You were playing...
Yeah. And it just completely shook loose all the lasting cobwebs about what the desire, it was gone. And then, so by the time Obama came around, I would say I was feeling it just like everyone else, but I was skeptical.
Yeah.
And I didn't take the full plunge like the young people I know you're referencing. They took the full plunge. And it's, how did we get here? But ultimately, where do we go? What's the response? And what are they gonna do with it? I hope it's progress. I hope it's the embracing of progressive ideas, and ultimately implementation of those.
Yeah, and that's the reason why I say, what are you gonna do with it? What will they do with it? And it's in their hands. The question is, one of the things that I sort of fear is to sort of fall into defeatism. We can't win.
Right.
That you do go into the sort of silo, and you look at the battles that you guys are fighting, where you say we can't beat the NCAA, we can't beat them, or you look at what's happening in politics, we can't win. Look at the numbers are overwhelming, or you look at the way that Kaepernick and the Players Coalition fell out, and it's like we can't win. And so this is why victories are important. This is why, I mean, David, it being in the locker room. Hey man, we were down by 25 and we cut it to 2. We still lost by 4. No. We need to win.
Right.
We can't have that many moral victories. We can have a couple of them because they give us hope of what we're capable of doing in terms of fight. But we need to win some stuff. And so you need victories. I worry and say, I don't listen to a whole lot of stuff that I don't have time for because time is short. But I'm listening to some of these people and like the Clarence Thomas, Black conservative movements as well. I remember dealing with that because I'm an 80s kid. So I remember all of that wave happening where, it was Thomas Sowell and Glenn Lowry and all the Black conservatives who were out there saying, they were essentially saying what we're talking about. Go get yours. You can't win. You cannot beat this whole system. So take care of yours. My issue has always been, is there a way to do both? Is there a way to make sure that, do you have to be broke if you're a martyr? But at the same time, is there, but if you're not, do you have to completely sell out completely? Is there some middle ground where you can still fight? I think the way you do that is by getting some victories. I think the way to stay in it is by saying, okay, we're not going to get everything, but we won this one, we won this one, we won that one. If you're constantly going, I got the right ideals, I've got the right politics, I've got the right thoughts, I think I have the right friends, and we constantly end up with nothing, then maybe you make different choices. And I'm hoping that's not what this new generation is going to do. Like, for example, like we're looking at this, I don't have any problem with people talking about the Democratic Party failing Black people. I have no issue with that because but those guys aren't the alternative.
Right.
So there's that sort of thing. So what I'm hoping, and I'm certainly like when I'm thinking about some of these different organizations and movements and things that are taking place, I was happy that Ed O'Bannon got a victory. So you're seeing different areas where, okay, when you guys, the PCL, when you guys are strategizing, or when I'm thinking about what stories I want to go after, you do have to see pathways. And I think as long as there are pathways, as long as people believe that, what, I see an opportunity here where we can make changes, then I think we'll be all right.
Have to go for it. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And so is that, in your opinion, bringing it just exclusively honing in on sports for a second, is that the sort of power structure or group of people that you envision that need to come together to bring about systemic change and not just minor or sort of facade change?
Well, I think the Rooney Rule is bullshit. I think the C-League rule is bullshit. I think diversity and inclusion and all of that stuff is, I don't think that's bullshit. But I think that I like what I'm seeing in baseball, in that there are a couple of different movements, and I don't know if it's happening in football or not yet, but, you know, the Fritz Pollard Alliance, I mean, mad respect to them for what they're doing, but they're banging their head against the wall. I like that there's a little movement in baseball, that there's a couple of guys, I think Dusty Baker and old Mike Norris from the old pitcher from the A's, and I think they're Torrey Hunter, I think some of the other guys are getting involved in this, is they're beginning to create a sort of Black analytics Ivy League organization where they're trying to get into some of these schools and they're trying to create that pipeline. That's interesting to me, because it's like, you can't just beg for the job. You got to say, okay, I'm going to at least try to come at you. You say you're requiring. And so maybe there's a way there. And I think that, you know, there's a way to try to fight them on their own terms, because essentially all they can do is keep throwing the lack of resume in your face.
Right.
You know, oh, we're looking for this and you don't have this. So I think where there's, I think that strategically, I like the fact that, you know, to your point, Ricky, about who is it going to take, who's going to be out front. I like the fact that some of these people that we know have the right values in the game are actually thinking about sort of some of those structural punctures. You know, even if I'm going to lean in on this and say, okay, you know, you're demanding that I have an Ivy League degree. If I can't fight that, I'm going to give you some Black people with Ivy League degrees who want to be in baseball, who want to be in basketball. If you're going to force me to embrace analytics, okay, then we're going to create for you a pipeline of people who have embraced it, who don't look like you. That's a part of it. I mean, another part of it would be to get them to think differently, but you can't control that part of it. But what you can do is you can use a lot of those resources that you have and a lot of the influence that you have to give them what they say doesn't exist. You know, they say that the Black Ivy Leaguer who wants to be in baseball doesn't exist. We'll show them that it does. So I like that instead of just, you know, walking around feeling like we can't win, there are people in the business who have decided, okay, well, let's see if there are some different areas where we see an opportunity to sort of puncture this structure.
Everybody's not attacking from the same or approaching from the same field. That's one of the messages I try to tell, you know, young athletes that I work with, is that you be honest with yourself, particularly about your athletic pursuits. Some kids play sports because they're fans and want to be a part of the game, but don't have the physical requirements to keep going. But it's like, you know, young kids will say, well, I still want to be a part of the game. Which direction should I go? I know that there are a few programs, and we have a program inside our youth facility where we try to, you know, introduce kids to, like, you know, broadcasting and, you know, sort of you know, other elements, right? You know, being an age and the other elements that go into sports, because, you know, those are opportunities as well. It wasn't until I got to Indiana that I realized how long you could do those jobs at an NBA scores desk. Had no idea. Those are like 20, 30.
I think Charles Barkley made more money broadcasting than he did playing.
Right.
Now maybe he has. Like, when I go to the movies, when I take my son to the movies, one of the things we always do at the end of the movie is we sit and watch all the credits. We do it for two reasons. The first reason is to give mad respect to everybody who made that movie possible. If you enjoyed it, say thank you to everybody who made that possible. Don't just, when you know, title screen, get up and leave. Just sit down and watch the rest of the credits. Obviously, when you watch Marvel movies, now you have to, because you know there's a scene at the end of it. You have to wait. So kind of like that they did that. But the other reason that I do it was to prove to him, I say to him, look at all those jobs.
Right.
You can be in the movies and not be Denzel. And that's one of the things that Black people have the biggest problems with, in my opinion, is that we always think, and we're always taught, that the only way to be in these businesses is to be in front of the camera. That you got to be David West, you got to be in the low block, or you got to be Michael Jordan, or you have to be Denzel Washington. Those are the only jobs we care about. But you can have a 30-year career in the movies and never be in front of the camera.
Right.
You can be a graphic artist or a CGI person or somebody and work on, I know a whole lot of people who work at ILM over at Star Wars up in Marin County, you know, and they've been working there for years and worked on best movies, and they've been all part of it and the whole thing. So that is an outstanding and a really important thing to remind them that there is a place for you. And yet you into the business and you don't see any black trainers. You don't see any, basketball's a little bit different, but you really don't see those numbers. I'm not saying the reason is because there aren't any. I'm saying there's never, also don't underestimate the fact that they won't hire you. There's always that. But at the same time, I think it's important to remember that you can be part of this and not be the superstar. You can be in the industry and not be the star. When you're talking to a lot of African Americans who view success only as being at the top of the top, because that's what we've been told. That's the only way.
One other thing there, and taking your point to the top of the top is in front of the camera, but I think the other element of the actual top of the pyramid that people overlook is ownership too. The access of whether it's black athletes, black entrepreneurs, whatever the case might be, the access that they get to ownership and the way that these approval processes are set up within these leagues so that many roadblocks put in place. Yeah. I know in the Heritage, you talked about this with Carmelo Anthony, is another potential part of that power structure having an athlete-driven component or league even to really combat what's going on here. Because if you change who's making the decisions at the very top, all of these levels that we've talked about throughout this conversation can also start to be changed.
Yeah, but it goes to your point earlier about talk being cheap. I mean, when Melo made that point about how if you really thought about it, if you really structure it properly, we as players have enough combined resources to at least try it, to try our own league, to try to create some investment, to try to do something. If we really wanted to change the structure, we've got enough to do it. However, he also said, why would you risk anything when someone's just handing you a $12 million check? You don't have to risk anything. It's much easier to just go out, play basketball, and have somebody hand you $15 million. There's no risk. So I understood both points. It reminded me of when Craig Hodges went to Michael Jordan back in the early 90s and told him, hey, Michael, you don't have to be taking scraps from Nike. You're bigger than they are at some level. You can do something. And he was like, nah, I'll let them handle it and go in his own way. So these battles have been around for a long time. These questions have been around for a long time. And it does take courage. It takes courage and it takes organization. It takes some level of charisma to send the message that it's possible. I think one of the hardest things about professional sports, and I think where we are right now with COVID-19 is reminding us, maybe somewhat in a positive way, even though it doesn't feel like it, that in sports, we have this idea that it's all intractable, that these industries are so ironclad that nothing can move them. Well, it wasn't that long ago when I was in grade, and I was in the 6th, 7th grade that the NBA finals were on tape delay. That long ago when people looked at some of these sports, that it's possible that you can change things. Rival leagues have a really difficult time. They really do. We haven't really seen a successful rival league since the ABA, where the NBA was like, okay, we should probably merge, okay, this went on long enough, let's merge. So you've got 4 teams that got to join the NBA, but the rest of them folded. So I get that part of it, that people say, okay, Melo, yeah, that sounds good, sounds real revolutionary, go for it, but you can't compete with them. And I did agree with his point too, where he said, their billions beat our millions. And when you start looking at the conspiracy, and it is a conspiracy, between the vast amount of money that these owners have, plus the broadcast networks that are completely on their side. It's an argument that I've always made when it came to labor. The reason why the broadcast media is not on your side is because the broadcast media has a business relationship with the teams, with the sport. Right. They're not going to protect you. Right. So you start looking at those raw dollars. It would require something steady, something remarkable, and something really sustained to budget. However, what I do think might be possible is it would be interesting to get an ownership group with some players that had equity that maybe you could begin to puncture it that way. but I don't know if the owners would ever allow that, because once you let one in, then all of a sudden you let many in, and maybe you start to have player-owned teams, and
Right.
that really changed the entire dynamic of how sports looks.
Mm.
In that process, what do you think would happen if an athlete ownership group came together to control the athlete pipeline at an earlier stage?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I worry about is what happens when the underdog becomes the power.
Mhm.
Do you change your ways, or do you just act like them? Meet the new boss, same as the old boss, right?
Right.
Like at the end of the heritage, I was talking about that with LeBron and Dwayne Wade and all these guys now who have all these mega millions, and they've got access and pipeline to power, and they're connected to Verizon and T-Mobile and the rest of it. And it's like, okay, so now that you're in charge, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to act like the same guy who's in charge? Or, can you be the power and the protest at the same time?
Right.
What do you end up doing with the fact that it's like, what's the line about the dog that's been chasing the bus and he finally catches it? Now what? Now, and so I'm real interested in seeing, what these guys are going to do, because dollar amounts. I mean, LeBron James's net worth is over 500 million now. It's not too long before he's a billionaire. You're looking at Jay-Z as a billionaire. You're looking at all these guys as they're not in the ruling. They're in part of the ruling class. They're not the ruling class.
No.
I mean, Jeff Bezos is 40 times richer than the richest black person. So there's a huge difference. I mean, his ex-wife is richer than the richest black person, and she just got divorced. So by being divorced than the richest black person, and that includes Oprah and Michael Jordan combined, by the way.
Right.
So when you're talking about real wealth, it's a huge, huge, huge battle. But that being the case, I do hope that what some of these athletes can do, if they start to move into some of these control positions, is recognize that the structure itself needs to change, instead of simply just adopting, okay, I'm going to take your job and do the exact same thing you did, right? What good does that do anybody? I'm actually really worried about that, because so many times when we fight for things, you fight to win, but then you don't follow up on the reason why you were fighting. You become what you were fighting. You're seeing that a little bit in tennis. You've got, Roger Federer, and a lot of these guys are now, they're managing some of the younger players, but the same structure's in place. Is it really a victory that, you get to kick out Donald Sterling and then acted like Donald Sterling? I mean, what good does it do? So,
been great conversation so far. Just got a couple more questions. These are a little bit lighter. I'll frame the first one. A lot of people don't know this about me, and I tell people. So I failed as a senior in high school. I had to flunked out as a senior in high school. I had to do an extra year of military school to graduate high school. And it was a tough moment for me, but as I look back, it was literally the best thing that happened to me. So I call it my fail up moment. And so what I want to do is I like to ask, our guests, if they had a fail up moment, and what that was, and what was the impact that fail up moment had on you.
Too many to count? Oh, goodness.
You have company in that general answer right there. That's what Andre said too.
What would be my fail up moment where you fall out of the tree and land on your feet? Well, yeah, probably Temple University.
Yeah.
Temple University, that was one where the university went on strike in 1990. Yeah, they went on strike in 1990. The faculty went on strike fall semester 90, and I was the editor of the student paper, and we were really going hard on the administration for not giving proper health benefits to the faculty. There was all this conversation about whether or not they were going to cancel the semester, and so because of that, we had more and more time not to pay for the semester.
Right.
So I missed the deadline and didn't pay for my semester. And because of that, the university was mad at me because I was so hard on them anyway.
Right.
So retroactively take my check. So I got bounced as editor.
Oh, wow.
All I had to do was pay up, but I didn't have a lot of money. I was trying to stretch it out as long as I could. Out of that moment came an opportunity that I had no idea was going to be there, which was, after being out, I ended up getting a phone call from the Philadelphia Inquirer, and they were like, "We like your spirit." And I was like, "Yeah, but I didn't pay my bills." And so they kind of took pity on me, and I got a job at the Inquirer as a reporter, and that's where I met the Pulitzer Prize-winning editor Asa Moore, and I enrolled back in school. He was one of my teachers. He connected me to San Francisco State, where I transferred to, and then there you go.
There you go.
That's how I got my first job at the Oakland Tribune, and there's your career.
Right, absolutely. And now the second question, again, I was born in 1980, came up in the 90s, toward the end of the 90s. Toward the end of the 90s, there was this push toward, I would say, being a thinker, and then the early 2000s was all this mindfulness and routine. And so I'm always curious about people and what they do in the morning. So it was a big thing about morning routines, and I'm always curious about what people do in the morning. So what do you do in the morning that sort of gets your day rolling?
As I'm the worst person to ask that question, because yeah, two reasons. One, I'm a night owl.
Okay.
Because I cover baseball. I mean, you can thank Wilt Chamberlain for this, but you guys have shoot around, so you don't really get to stay up that late. Whereas baseball, when the game, I cover baseball, we get done with the game at 10 o'clock, 10:15. I'm out of the ballpark at 11:30 or so. We don't have to be back at the ballpark till like 4 o'clock. I would be like, when I was on the road, I'm like, if I'm in bed by 4, I can still get 8 hours.
Right.
And so, I'm working, this is on book number 10 now, and I write all my books overnight. I went to bed at 5 this morning. So I guess the real answer to the question is that, how do I start my morning? I start it by going to bed.
Right. Well, there you go.
So yeah,
Right.
I got up this morning. I woke up at 1:15, and I was like, "Oh man, are we doing the pod right now?" I didn't even know. I had no idea. I am pretty bad at it when I do have to get up, because now that you got a child, you got to get him up for school and everything. Learning how to eat breakfast. When I work at home, I always make it a point to get up, take a shower, get ready like I'm leaving the house, so I feel like I'm awake and doing something.
Right.
Generally speaking, I am useless in the mornings. I'm just not very. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, good deal. We've learned something from that regardless.
There are all types of types out there, man. I mean,
right,
my wife was a figure skater, so her entire childhood was spent at 5 a.m. practices. I was a baseball player where most of our games were at night, So again, I'm ready to work out in the evenings. She wants to work out first thing in the morning. Types.
I lived in San Francisco. I lived in the Haight, and I used to date this girl, and we both worked at night, but she was a morning person. So she would get up at 6 o'clock, and I'm like, nope, we don't break up, and we do not come close to waking me up. One, I don't drink coffee, and two, there's no way you're waking me up at 5:45 for any reason unless I got a flight to catch.
Right.
And one other lighter note question I like to ask is, when all of this is over and the all clear is given by medical professionals, what are you most looking forward to doing when the social distancing period is over?
Playing tennis. I had to get back out there and work on my game. I have not hit a ball in a month, 2 months now. Not even 2 months. Yeah, it's been about a month now, and I miss playing. Body in motion stays in motion, and I feel awful right now. I can't even move right now. So I'm very, very, very much looking forward to getting out there and hitting some balls.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, this was a fantastic conversation, Howard. Thanks again for joining us.
I'm glad I finally got a chance to talk to you. And I was going to say, and David, I've been wanting to talk to you for forever anyway, because my boy Monty Poole always talked about how great you were to him in the Bay.
Yeah. Really good guy. Monty was a good guy, and I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. Like I said, before, man, I've been a huge fan of yours for a while, just from a distance, and we connected a few years,
Yeah.
back over Twitter, and like I
Mm-hmm.
said, I know sometimes, and I feel it sometimes, because one of your favorite tweets that is when I know you're fed up because you'll just say it's all bullshit, and I love it. But it speaks to me, because I'm like, I understand where he probably is. Like, it's just too much.
Right.
Things are just coming, and it's just all bullshit.
It's all bullshit. It's true. Well, I'll tell you what's been real interesting about it, and I'm concerned, is that the march is on, man. It's happening right now, right? And the reactions that we're getting in terms of not really covering this stuff and not really addressing it. On the one, there's opportunity, but on the other hand, it goes back to that thing before about sort of, the despair of what are you going to do at the moment that you're in right now?
Right.
And that's a big question for a lot of people.
For all of us, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just a reminder for our viewers, listeners, if you haven't already, be sure to check out The Heritage and Full Dissidence. You will definitely thank us if you take the time to read those. Again, Howard, thank you for joining us. This was awesome. And that's a wrap on Forward Thinking.